The following is brought to you by Vertical Vet. Rethink your GPO.
Hello, Vertical Vet family. I am Dr. Ernie Ward, Chief Veterinary Officer for Vertical Vet, and it is once again my pleasure and privilege to welcome you to another edition of our Vet Med School series. And this is the content where we really are talking to veterinary professionals who are prescribing, diagnosing, treating, doing surgery, all those things that we do. But anybody can watch this, of course. But today's topic is really important because we're going to be talking about changes in FDA guidelines and how they actually want to regulate and look at drugs that we use from compounding pharmacists. And we have got one of our preferred partners here today from Wedgewood Pharmacy, and that is Marcy Bliss, who is the CEO of Wedgewood Pharmacy. And again, they are the leading compounding pharmacy for all animals in the United States. She is in charge of the whole public affairs, strategic decision-making, and issues management programs. And the thing about her is she is so active both at the federal level and state levels. This lady knows more about the regulations concerning compounded drugs than I think the FDA does. She is quite phenomenal. And again, today we're going to be talking about this GFI 256, which you may or may not be familiar with. We'll talk about some of the data as far as our colleagues, what they know and don't know about this. But she is very well respected within the industry, both the profession as well as the pharmacy industry. She sits on a lot of boards, a lot of recognition and accolades, and I just can't wait to get in this conversation. Marcy, it's really an honor to be presenting to the Vertical Vet membership with you today. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us. We are honored to be part of this discussion today, Dr. Ward.
Well, guys, in case you're wondering, this entire thing we're going to talk about, Wedgewood Pharmacy alerted us over a year ago, and they said, hey, guys, there's some impending regulations, legislation on the Hill that we're aware of at FDA. Would you mind helping us? And so with the help of Wedgewood Pharmacy experts, we crafted on behalf of our Vertical Vet members, all 1,300 of us, we said, hey, we want to delay the implementation because, Marcy, this was supposed to go into effect last October, right? But we got a bit of a reprieve till April 1st. So again, I want to thank Wedgewood for really bringing this to our attention so that we could speak on behalf of our veterinary colleagues at Vertical Vet. We were able to effectively lobby FDA, and they gave us an extension, but this is going to happen fast and furious. And Marcy, there's no better place to start than what the heck are we talking about? Let's give us an overview of what is GFI 256.
That's right. So thanks. GFI 256 is shortcut for the name of the actual guidance, which is the guidance for industry for animal health compounding from bulk drug substances, so also known as the GFI 256. So this applies to compounding when it is done from bulk active pharmaceutical ingredients only. So it does not apply to the compounding that some veterinarians do in their clinic, where they take an FDA-approved drug and they crush it and they add it into a flavored suspension. So this doesn't cover that kind of compounding. But when you're engaging with a compounding pharmacy who specializes in this, most of that compounding is done from FDA registered repackagers of chemicals who provide us with the active pharmaceutical ingredients to do the compounding that we do. So what it is guidance about that particular class of compounded medication, and it sets up a list of drugs that are allowed to be ordered for office use going forward after April 1st implementation, and a list of drugs that require a patient-specific prescription, and it allows dispensing from the veterinarian's clinic, so that's the good news. And it also requires a little bit of administrative burden as far as medical rationale that veterinarians will have to give us, and adverse event reporting of medications when they happen.
Yeah, and again, we're going to go into each one of those tenets in just a second, but if you're wondering, like, does this apply to you? It probably does, because most of us contact Wedgewood when we need those special formulations, those different size, the liquid formulations, the transdermals, all that stuff. So this is really important because, you know, I think a lot of times veterinarians are saying, oh, I don't really use any of those things that would be restricted. That sounds like something exotic, and it's really not. I mean, Margie, you guys serve over 86% of all veterinary clinics in the United States. I mean, this is a very big deal, right?
We do. You know, a veterinarian turns to FDA-approved drugs when they can to treat a patient, but there are instances where they can't turn to an FDA-approved drug, and that's where compounding comes in. So if there's a medication that can't be administered because the patient won't be pilled and they need a suspension, or if there's a medication on commercial back order, or something like that, it needs to be in a different strength. It's a human health generic, but it needs to be in a strength for a Chihuahua, right? That's where compounding comes in, and veterinarians really depend on compounding in their practice. We feel it's about 10% of what veterinarians use to treat their patients.
Wow, 1 in 10. So guys, this is a big problem. All right, this is going to happen very quickly. Despite our delay efforts from last October, April 1st, this goes into action. And so whenever you're watching this, again, this applies from this point forward, but walk us through the 3 big changes that GFI 256 has for individual veterinary clinics.
First, you can rest assured that FDA is aiming their enforcement activity at pharmacies, not at veterinarians. So pharmacies will really be helping veterinarians navigate the complexity of the GFI 256. And the first way they're going to be doing that is managing lists. FDA is reviewing nominations, and they're putting drug families, or really very specific, APIs plus a strength plus a dosage form for a particular species on one of several lists. So if those medications are under review by the FDA, or if they've been added to what they're calling a listed list by the FDA, veterinarians can continue to order those medications for office use. But if not, if they're reviewed and put on a not listed list, those will in the future require a patient-specific prescription. And one thing I just want to add here is there's kind of a matrix of this federal guidance and state regulations. You still have to follow your state regulations as well.
Right. Yeah. And that's a really good point, guys. So if you're in Florida, if you're in North Carolina, if you're in California or Idaho, you really also need to be checking in with your state pharmacy board or your veterinary medical board because, again, you may have some specific limitations or restrictions that we can't cover today. This is about federal oversight and guidelines. But go back to that list again. I think I want to make sure that we're clear. There are 3 current lists that the FDA has. They have some awkward nomenclature, but maybe walk us through those 3 lists very briefly.
Sure. And there are more than 3 lists because they have lists for wildlife and food producing animals. They have other lists, but we'll talk mostly today about dogs, cats, and horses, right? The list for dogs, cats, and horses. So there are 3 of those. There are opportunities to nominate drugs to be put on the list of what you're allowed to order for office use. And while FDA is reviewing those nominations, it goes onto a list called the under review list. So about 80% of the medications that we get orders for office use are on that under review list. So come April 1st, you'll be able to continue to order those medications if your state law allows for office use. Then after that review, they put it on a listed list or a not listed list. The listed list means you get to continue to order it for office use, and there are already I think fewer than 20 on that listed list that the FDA is saying they looked at these. They are emergency needs. There are urgent needs. There aren't FDA approved drugs to substitute. So yes, you can keep these in your office for administration or dispensing to the patient. And then if they review it, they may put it on a not listed list. There are now 28 medications on the not listed list. And the not listed list means you'll have to give us a patient-specific prescription. And even though it's complex, again, the pharmacies are going to keep track of this. Hopefully all pharmacies, not just Wedgewood pharmacies, but we've built SOPs and technology to track it so that we can help veterinarians navigate the complexity.
Yeah, and we'll be giving you guys, Vertical Vet members, special access to their website. They've got an entire list of resources that are going to help us as Vertical Vet members. So I really appreciate that. So again, just to review, Marcy, there is a listed list of approved compounded medications. Those are the okay. Then there is a listed, there's a listed, not listed, or not, right? Give me the second one where they're you can't get them.
Yeah. No, you can still get them. There should be nothing that you have used in the past that is not available to you in the future state after April 1st. The difference is, can I order it for my practice without a patient name, or do I need a patient name for the medication? Right. So, and what goes along with needing a patient name, we may be also requesting a medical rationale from the veterinarian. And we'll talk about that.
We're going to get into that. And then the final list is under review, which is going to be constantly in flux. And guys, just a little bit of context. Basically, the FDA, when all of this started up over a year ago, the FDA turned naturally to the American Veterinary Medical Association, the AVMA, and said, hey, give us a list of compounded drugs so that we can preserve their usage. We understand the most common ones. And the AVMA submitted 12 drugs. Now, Wedgewood, to their credit, have nominated over 192 drugs to date. So, guys, this is really, again, disappointing to me as a veterinarian, as a 30-plus year member of the AVMA. It's like, that's what, Marcy, this would have been a very different situation if we had just relied on the AVMA. I mean, I got to thank Wedgewood, for nominating, because you guys have really done the bulk of the work for the United States.
Yes, well, thank you. To be fair, we're closer to it than the AVMA is, only because we have requests from veterinarians. We have a history of transactional data to depend on. So that's where we went. What do veterinarians ask us for office use? If veterinarians are asking us for things for office use, then they must need them for office use, right? So we went there and we looked and analyzed, and 98% of the drugs that we get orders for office use, we nominated. Now, they put some of those drugs on the not listed list. So we're down to about 80% of drugs that are still available for office use today. But we're continuing to look to revise any of those nominations that got moved to the not listed list. And the FDA has told us they want to hear from veterinarians. So if something you depend on, the FDA wants to hear from you. So we'll talk about that too in a little bit.
Okay, so the first thing is there's these lists. They're awkwardly named, but they're the list. The second thing is this rationale. So explain that, because, Marcy, what I think is going to happen come April 1st is that a veterinarian is going to turn to their veterinary technician or their office manager or whomever that does the ordering through Wedgewood or wherever they get their compounding drugs. They're going to call them up and they're going to be like encountering an entirely different process. So explain to us just briefly, we're going to go into more detail in just a few minutes, but what does this mean by you may be required to supply a clinical difference supported by blah, blah, blah?
Right. So if FDA has put something on the not listed list, it is because they believe there's something commercially available from an FDA manufacturer that could be used to treat that patient. So if you're prescribing medication that is on the not listed list, FDA wants to know, well, what's the reason you're doing that, right? So we've seen some of the comments on doxycycline, for example, and some veterinarians are submitting to the docket, hey, I'd have to give this patient 8 tablets twice a day, and that is going to get in the way of compliance. And that's why I'm using the compounded medication. So they're looking for some support, although they've said in a Q&A that they're not going to question the veterinarian's rationale. So they're looking for us to capture it, but they're not going to question it. So I think, that's fair. It's going to take a little more time, a few seconds added to your phone call or your online order, but this is how the guidance has been designed.
Right. And again, the thing here is to prepare your team, because what I don't want people to do is call up Wedgewood and then suddenly be encountered with this different process and they're being asked additional questions and medical rationale, and suddenly everybody get nervous and upset and they freak out and don't know what to do. Right. So this is why we're bringing this to you guys as Vertical Vet members. We want to make sure that you're ahead of this so that you just don't create additional stress and burden on your staff. Speaking of additional burden, adverse event reporting with compounded medications now shifts the responsibility back to the veterinarian. So maybe explain briefly what that means.
That's right. Included in the GFI 256 is a requirement to report adverse events on an electronic form 1932A. We've included a link to that in the link we're going to give you later on today in this presentation. But yes, that's a new requirement that you report adverse events to the FDA.
All right, so now let's rewind the clock just a bit. Several months back, you guys did a survey of veterinarians saying, hey guys, do you know about GFI 256? You had some pretty astounding results. Tell us a little bit about what you found.
Yes, we did. And, we did a similar survey of veterinary pharmacies, and a lot of them were not that aware either. So what we found is that 90% of veterinarians just didn't even know that the GFI 256 had been finalized. And so that was a little bit alarming, right? And 93% weren't aware that the enforcement date was in October, and only 10% of veterinarians had any confidence that they were ready for this change. So this is part of the data that we use to educate the FDA on the industry not being ready. And, there being potential problems with patient access and chaos. So they were, moved the date back to April 1st with Vertical Vet's help as well. And we were happy for that. It gave us a couple more months to do a lot of these webinars and conversations that we're having with the industry.
And again, Marcy, I'm glad you brought that up about not all pharmacies are even knowledgeable about GFI 256. Again, talking to a Vertical Vet member just a few weeks ago, and what I've been telling all of you guys, if you've had any conversations or interactions with me the past few months, I've said, hey, whatever compounding pharmacy you use, if you don't use Wedgewood because they're on top of this, they're actually leading the way, you need to make sure that they are prepared and kind of what their process is going to be come April 1. And so one of our members had contact, they have a small local compounding pharmacy that they primarily use. They called them up after, I said, hey, you guys should make sure they're prepared. And really, Marcy, as you said, that local pharmacist didn't know, right? So again, whatever you do, guys, just be prepared because, if you expect all of compounding pharmacists to be the same, you're going to be disappointed, I'm afraid. All right, so let's talk about this office use availability. And I guess let's start, Marcy, by defining what you mean when it comes to compounded drugs for office use.
Right. When we use that term, we mean that the veterinarian orders the medication to have on their shelf for either administration or dispensing. And most states permit office use and dispensing, but there are 8 states that already require patient-specific prescriptions on every order. And there are some states that have dispensing limits, but FDA, the guidance has no limits on dispensing. And as long as it's on the under review list or the listed list, you're still able to order those medications for office use. That's what we mean.
Okay, so again, these established lists, just once again, go through these reviewed and not listed, under review and listed. I mean, it's really, these are those same lists applied, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure. And the next slide, we have some examples of drugs that have been added to those lists. So
and guys, before Marcy gets into this, because this is so nuanced, when all of this was brought to our attention at Vertical Vet, over a year ago, Marcy, I assumed that it would be based, that the regulation guidelines oversight would be based on an active ingredient. For example, like apomorphine. So if apomorphine would be on this list or that list or whatever, but what we really discovered was that it wasn't just the active ingredient, the drug, it was actually the formulation, the dosage, right? The route, the species. I mean, there's a lot more to this than just, is apomorphine on the list or not? Because as you can clearly see from this slide, it's on one list, it's okay. And on the other list, you may have a little bit of a challenge, right?
That's right, Dr. Ward. They asked us for highly detailed nomination information, not just us, anyone who's placing a nomination, including the various dosage forms, the strengths of the drug, the species the drug was going to be used in. And what we have seen, and we were surprised as well, is that they've split a lot of our nominations where some elements of our nomination got put on the listed list and some elements got put on the not listed list. So, and you see an example of that here with apomorphine. So the apomorphine ophthalmic tablets got put on the not listed list. Those require a patient-specific prescription, as much as that seems difficult to understand why. But and then on the listed list available for office use is the solution for injection. So it might be a good time to review when you look at what's on these various lists, what you're using in your office. If you really feel like you need to have apomorphine on hand, you're going to have to think about changing the formulary to having that solution for injection.
Right. And again, so if you're like many of us who use apomorphine ophthalmic to induce emesis, I mean, this is something that you may want to continue to nominate, so get your colleagues together and we will give you the links on how to nominate. In fact, we'll walk you through. Wedgewood's done a fantastic job of giving you 3 simple steps on what you need to do to make this more effective and efficient for you. So again, I think this is important to recognize that it's not about just the drug. It's actually about everything that goes around it, the formulation, the dosing, the species. I mean, this gets complicated quickly. And I think, Marcy, again, I think a lot of vets are going to be surprised when they see, well, wait, one form of apomorphine, no problem, and another form, I'm going to have to go through all this medical rationale and so forth.
And you're going to see that with other medications that were nominated as well, that they allowed certain species to have something for office use, but other species need to be patient specific. So again, hopefully your pharmacy will help you navigate that. And it can be complicated and it changes on a weekly basis. Last week, they had 2 updates to the various lists. And so we keep our eyes on that every day. It's our core business, right? Serving veterinarians. And it is more difficult for your local community pharmacy because they're serving human patients and they have FDA approved drugs and they take insurance. So sometimes animal health is just a component of their business versus the core of our business. So that's why we're so on top of this and paying so much attention and making sure that we can help veterinarians through this transition.
Right. And again, as part of this whole correspondence, this initial, with us getting involved with this issue at the bequest of Wedgewood, I did have some back and forth with some officials over at the FDA, Marcy, and I'm sure you've had this similar type of conversation. But basically, there were a couple of drugs like doxycycline and so forth, and they were saying we already have 3 or 4 different commercially available sizes. That should be more than adequate, right? Because most humans only have 2 different sizes. And I was very quick to point out that when it comes to dogs, specifically, from the smallest to the largest, that's a 40-fold difference in body mass, right? So Chihuahuas to Great Danes, there's a 40 times spread. And no, 3 or 4 different strengths just isn't adequate. So, compounding pharmacists serve a very vital role in my practice. And again, Marcy, I think that vets we're going to have to continue to nominate these drugs, these formulations, because from an FDA perspective, they're used to dealing with human formulations. They're going, well, there's a couple of sizes of people. That's more than enough, right?
Yeah, this is CVM that's looking at it, though. So it is the Center for Veterinary Medicine. There are veterinarians looking at this, but I have rarely seen a fractious human when having to take a pill. So, there are different situations between human health and animal health. And so, we're trying to accommodate the various needs to ensure compliance in the animal population. So,
right. And
yeah.
Doxy is just a great example because we all know you are stacking up pills, sometimes for these larger dogs. So it can be a real challenge.
Equine animals as well. You might have to give many multiples of those human health tablets versus a flavored granule that's made just for a horse for compliance purposes. Yeah.
Well, there has been one additional development very recently. Maybe you'd like to talk about this 503BS.
This is a complication as well. Pharmacies, the state licensed pharmacies are in a category the FDA calls a 503A. So that's a traditional state licensed compounding pharmacy. There is another category that was established in 2013 with the passage of the Drug Quality and Security Act called a 503B outsourcing facility. State pharmacies have to comply with the United States Pharmacopoeia standards, which are very rigorous. 503Bs have to comply with CGMP standards, which are very different. They're made for larger scale production, like medium scale production, I would say. So in this case, there are a handful of 503Bs out there that serve the animal health market, including Wedgewood Connect. That's our 503B. So for now, because there is no reference to 503Bs in the current GFI 256, FDA has let us know that they're not going to enforce. They're going to use enforcement discretion with medications coming out of the 503Bs. We have about 70 of our most popular preparations coming out of that. So even if something is on the not listed list, if you get it from our 503B outsourcing facility or another one of the facilities that serve the animal health space, you can continue to order that for office use until there's further guidance. So we don't know what the next version of guidance is going to say or what the allowances might or might not be. But for now, they're going to use enforcement discretion on 503B products.
Yeah, and that's actually reassuring, and that makes our life a little bit easier, at least your life a lot easier, I think, for sure. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, the impact it's going to have on you as a general practitioner come April 1st. And I think that the first thing we talked about is understanding these lists, right? And that your staff is going to be asked different things, which could delay your access to these drugs, which could delay treatment. I think that, for me, as I've mentioned now several times, Marcy, and you and I have gone around the country talking about this topic, I do fear sort of that unprepared staff member who calls Wedgewood and suddenly they're like, wait, what? Medical rationale? Wait, what? I've got to do all this stuff. And I think that not only is that sort of, going to take you more time, but we're going to get annoyed, right? So please be patient. I mean, we're all working through this, but, I think that for me, it's more about informing your staff today. They should go to the website. We're going to give you again, Wedgewood Vet, we're going to give you that exact link and your QR code and all that stuff. But you really need to prepare your staff today, Marcy.
Absolutely. And we've been preparing for a year, as you said, both with making nominations, with changing our system so we can support the changing lists and the capturing of medical rationale, and with training our customer care team so that we can handhold you through the process. We know how busy you are. We know that compounding is only a small subset of what you use in your practice. And so, this is a big change. And so we're hoping that we can raise awareness. And again, Dr. Ward and I have been, I think, doing weekly webinars. It seems almost we've been working together to try to educate veterinarians around the country that the change is coming, and also the technical staff, because if you have somebody calling in to order office use and now we're asking for a prescription, again, that's where the delay in treatment might come, because then that technician is going to have to go back to you as a veterinarian and say, look, they won't sell me this for office use anymore. Now I need a patient name. Like, what do we do here? So it is a good idea to have a meeting. We have some videos on our website. Actually, we have a 60-second to learn about the GFI video. So it's something that you could share with your team and maybe have a staff meeting where you have a conversation around it to get everybody ready for this change.
Yeah, this 60-second video, guys, is amazing. It really captures all the essence of this issue. And I think if you could just have your team, everybody watch that, then most of your questions would be answered. But we keep going back to this issue of nominating drugs. And as I've mentioned, the AVMA, they gave us 12. They gave the FDA 12. Wedgewood has done over 192. But what the FDA has repeatedly communicated, both to us at Vertical Vet and, of course, Wedgewood, is that they want to hear from individual practitioners most of all. So walk us through this importance of you as a Vertical Vet member actually nominating a drug.
Right. Veterinarians were expected by the agency to be doing the nominations, not compounding pharmacies. So the FDA has expressed to us that they were surprised that the nominations came from Wedgewood Pharmacy and not veterinarians. But the reason we leaned into it is we know how busy veterinarians are. And if you go in there and look at the nominations that we've done, they're highly technical. They took an extraordinary amount of research and a team of 10 people almost the past year. They've been working full time on these nominations. So they're very, very technical. And there is some dialogue back and forth with the agency when they have questions. And, we have many references in those nominations. So we knew veterinarians didn't have time to do this, which is why we leaned in. But in their surprise, what FDA has said is we need to hear from veterinarians. We want veterinarians to support these nominations. So we've tried to make it easier. On the link we're going to give you, there is some instructions on how to comment on nominations. And there's also some email marketing we're doing to invite veterinarians to follow a link and put their comments in. We've done an email on isoflupridone, and that's in equine medicine. We've done an email on doxycycline in small animal medicine, and we're going to continue to do that. So if you are a customer of Wedgwood's and you order for office use, we're going to send you an email and say, please let FDA know why you need this medication in your clinic for office use. If you do, if you don't need it, if patient-specific prescribing works for you, then, this isn't really a problem. But if you really need something in your practice, we really need your support, and FDA really needs to hear from you.
Yeah, and there are plenty of those. So again, you on your website, and again, you go to wedgwood.vet GFI comments, and again, all these links will provide for you. But the reality is they make it very, very simple. Walk us through these. There's really 3 things you need to do. I think you guys can do this in just a matter of minutes. I know that we've gone through the process at Vertical Vet, and literally it just took very little time and effort.
That's right. People, the veterinarians that are submitting comments, and they're starting to add up now. It's a couple of sentences, really, or a paragraph of why they need this for office use. So always include the name of the bulk drug substance. Focus on the clinical difference. Why do you need this medication as opposed to an FDA-approved product that's available? I gave you the doxycycline example earlier. And then just follow the proper format. Again, we provided the link. There's kind of a series of things you have to fill out, but mostly it's this paragraph, 2 or 3 sentences, and that's what FDA wants to hear.
Yeah, and again, I think that if you call up and one of the drugs is on a not listed or it's under review, this is when you need to take action, because without your efforts, it's going to stay there or get moved off to the unavailable to the not listed list, right? So that's what I really want to avoid. I would also encourage you to take action earlier, because like many things in the federal government, right now the focus and attention will be on this issue. But if we wait 6 months, a year, they're on to the next thing. In fact, there's some other changes and guidelines that we want to talk about briefly here that will begin to take effect in November. But again, when it comes to this specific issue, please look at these lists, see if things that you use regularly or need, then if they're on these under review or not listed lists, then you need to go ahead and file this little simple form. It takes you very little time at all, because Marcy, I fear that people are going to say, oh, wow, it doesn't affect me today. And then 6 months from now go, oh my gosh. And the FDA is like, hey, yeah, we'll get to it when we can get to it.
Right. It's very likely that you have more power to impact the decisions they're still considering and making and the under review process than after they've made a decision, right? After they've made a decision and put it on a final list, it's probably going to be harder to turn that around. So I would act now.
Yeah, and again, just as a teaser, because I'm sure we're going to have you back to talk to Vertical Vet members, there's some other impending changes that are set to take effect maybe in November of this year. Maybe just quickly give us a rundown on that.
That's right. Those changes taking effect in November of this year are United States Pharmacopoeia quality standards. And they are standards that govern state licensed pharmacies and veterinarians in compounding non-sterile drugs, sterile drugs, and hazardous drugs. So it's a pretty substantial change in the quality standard. And the biggest impact of those changes, and there are many elements to them, but the biggest impact on veterinarians will be shortening of beyond use dates of medications. So we are working through this. They allow, if you do extended testing, for you to have some extensions of the beyond use date from what the tables are that they presented as very short beyond use dates. But it is something that we're concerned about. It is something that the industry is working on. And you'll see big changes coming in November, because something you might have had, a year dating on is now going to be, 4 months dating or something like that. So
Right.
there are big changes coming forth in November as well.
Yeah, so stay tuned, guys. Again, I think the biggest change that you're going to see in April 1st is going to be this medical rationale, because every time you call in and you're trying to get this for office use, you're going to be asked what's the rationale. So maybe just, briefly explain to vets like how you guys see it, how you're interpreting it, and your suggestions for medical rationale.
Yeah, I think the best way to explain this is to give you examples, and we have 4 of them here for medical rationale. So go ahead to the next slide and we'll give you an example. The first one, the commercial product would reduce compliance or is not effective for achieving medical outcomes. So we talked about this. If you have to give 8 pills twice a day, that's going to be tough to achieve compliance with. If you have to fractionate a tablet into 6 equal pieces to give to a very small patient, that's not going to work. So that's rationale number 1. Go to the next slide and we'll give you rationale number 2. As you know, it is a problem and has been year after year, is there's a lot of back orders in animal health. So if the commercial product is not available or you can't source the commercial product, that's where compounding pharmacies lean in to help you with continuity of care. So that would be rationale number 2.
Although there is one hiccup to that you just recently discovered through your conversations and meetings with the FDA around backorder drugs. So let's talk about that for just a second. So let's say that there's a commercial product out there, okay, that we're all used to, and it goes on backorder. Previously, we've been able to call up Wedgewood and say, hey, we can't get the commercial version, so can you guys help us out here with the compounded version? And you have. But now maybe the FDA is going to have a slightly different take on it.
Right. So if that drug is not a nominated drug and is not on the positive list, and maybe in fact it's on the negative list because there's a commercially available drug that goes on back order, but it's sitting there still on the not listed list, we'll need a patient specific prescription for that drug. So we won't be able to provide that for office use as long as it's on the not listed list. So, we will be hopefully educating FDA when those situations come up, and they will be able to make decisions that support patient access to emergency medications. But as for now, if it's on the not listed list, we need a patient-specific prescription.
Right. Okay, so let's keep moving on with these rationales. Okay, so now the third one is going to be, it's the dosage form. So explain to us how this would impact, getting access to this medication.
Right. A lot of the compounding that happens is a change in dosage form. It might be available as a tablet, but we need to make it into an ophthalmic or, a sterile injectable, for example. And that can't be done with a tablet, right? There's too much excipient in those medications. So if you using a commercially available dosage form is unsafe or unachievable, then that's a good reason why a compounded medication needs to be prepared from bulk ingredients.
All right. And then the fourth rationale that you guys are proposing.
Yeah, this one applies to my dog, Ginger, who's allergic to chicken, right? Natural chicken flavoring. and my dog don't go together. So if the patient or the population that you're treating has an intolerance, a sensitivity, a toxicity, xylitol, for example, then that is another good reason to use a compounding pharmacy that's providing the medication from pure active pharmaceutical ingredients.
Yeah, and a lot of these cases, guys, are just those dogs and cats that just don't tolerate for whatever reason. Often it's inexplicable, but you try a different form and voila, everything is okay. Maybe it's an inactive part, as Marcy's saying, but I think this is a big one. This is kind of a catch-all, and I think that for a lot of us, we're going to do that. Now, you were going to be using this one, but let's get back to this one other important point, Marcy. This is Wedgewood Pharmacy's rationales, how you guys are going to give us drop-down lists. That doesn't, I mean, I know you guys are working across the pharmacy industry or the veterinary pharmacy industry to standardize this, but veterinarians who use other pharmacists either may encounter different language or quote unquote rationale or none at all.
Absolutely. The reason we came up with these four, and we worked a long time to come up with these four, is to make it easier for the veterinarian. So most of our orders come in through our online e-commerce channel, and that we're going to have a drop down. So it's going to be very easy for a veterinarian and very efficient for them to give us one of those rationales. But at another pharmacy, you may find it's just open ended, where they're just asking you, what is your medical rationale? And then you have to, on the fly, come up with something. So, but I'm sure you have medical rationale, or you wouldn't be using a compounded medication. So yeah, there's various types of pharmacy systems out there, just like there's various types of PIM systems out there for veterinarians, and not all of them accommodate capturing medical rationale.
Yeah, and I'll tell you too, Marcy, I think some of the smaller compounding pharmacists, once they find out about this, they may say, hey, vets, this could be a little bit of a hassle for us. We don't even know what to do. This sounds like a lot of paperwork. And so you may even find access through your quote unquote local compounding pharmacist a little bit limited because, Marcy, again, if you're busy as a small little town pharmacist, this might just be a headache too many, for vet usage.
The GFI is one level of headache, but really when USP goes into effect, as we talked about in November,
that's a great point.
Is, if you're getting sterile medications or hazardous drugs, 25% of our non-sterile drugs are considered hazardous. 50% of our sterile drugs are considered hazardous. If those community pharmacies haven't made the physical changes to their facility to work with hazardous drugs, to vent outside into the atmosphere, there might be discontinuations of those drugs. So, some people have made those investments, but many have not. So yes, this year there's two periods of disruption, April and November.
Oh boy. Oh boy, wow. Okay, so for our members, we've got some special links here. This is a QR code that will take you immediately to all things that you need to know about the GFI. So again, you can snap a picture on your phone or do whatever. Again, we'll have resources on our websites and all of our stuff as well at Vertical Vet. But Marcy, I think you guys have done a fantastic job here. And again, at this website, you can get the rationale list. You can get, if you want to nominate a drug for sure, some of the FAQs around this. And again, straight links to the FDA. So if you want to nominate a drug, or if you have a question or comment, I mean, this is a great resource. I can't thank you enough for actually putting this together because, Marcy, prior to this, we were all wondering, wow, how will we do this? And you guys made it super simple.
Yes, and we did that on purpose again because we know how busy you are and that you're going to need a hand. And so I actually used this myself when I was looking through the list this morning. I referred back to wedgewood.vet/GFI myself to get a look at what things are currently. So I do encourage you to go there. It's very simple, and there are sublinks there that help you with everything you need to know to be compliant on April 1st.
Yeah. So, Marcy, again, as we sort of wrap up today's conversation, what last bits of advice or sort of, I guess, information that you'd like to impart to Vertical Vet members? Because, obviously, we use you. We love you guys. You guys are an amazing resource for us at Vertical Vet. But, what's that last little bit of saying, hey, guys, is it going to be okay? I mean, we're here to help. Give us that last bit of sort of, I think, hope.
I would just say hang in there, right? Change is hard, and change is especially hard when you're very, very busy. So hang in there, be kind to your compounding pharmacists because they're managing the change as well. And they don't necessarily want to make this change, right? We didn't write this. We didn't necessarily sign up for it. But we have worked over the years to comment and push back and shape it. And we're still meeting with FDA regularly. I had a meeting with CVM yesterday to make sure we understand their interpretations and make it work as best as we possibly can for your patients and for your practice. So hang in there, and we'll all be kind to each other as we navigate this change.
I love this. And again, thank you, Marcy, so much for not only spending time with us today at Vertical Vet, but for all your efforts to advocate on our behalf. Because honestly, without you, I think this would be a disaster for veterinarians all across the country. I think we'd be all scrambling to say, how do we get this? And oh man, we'd have tremendous delays. So thank you.
Yeah, well, you and Vertical Vet have taken the lead in educating the whole country. I mean, you have put your hand on the bag for making sure as much as we possibly can that everybody knows what's happening. And we so appreciate your partnership in this, and Vertical Vet's partnership as well.
Gosh, thank you guys so much. Well, listen, that was Marcy Bliss, CEO of Wedgewood Pharmacy, our preferred compounding pharmacy partner for Vertical Vet members. If you want to find out more about GFI 256, definitely check out those links. We'll have them all over our website, all over our socials, all over everything we can, because we want to make sure that you are prepared for this impending change. Again, guys, these are the kind of things that we want to bring you to Vertical Vet members for Vet Med School. So share this video, share this content with colleagues who maybe haven't heard about it. Even if they're not a Vertical Vet member, we want to make sure that they are prepared on April 1st. And remember, guys, this goes forward. This continues to change. So stay tuned for more developments. As Marcy mentioned, there's going to be additional changes coming in November. We will be sure to alert you first so that you can be prepared. On behalf of the entire amazing team here at Vertical Vet, I am Dr. Ernie Ward. It has been my pleasure. Thanks again to Wedgewood Pharmacy. We will talk to you soon. Bye.